Hi there, welcome to Scrap and Coffee. We are going to continue with the flex folio, and I'm going to work on our C piece of the cover, so that's why I'm calling it the C section. And first that we are going to work on our piece D. The cutting guide will be on my website as soon as it's done. But piece C has two score lines, and I'm going to place tape on the dented side, and I'm going to taper the 1/2 inch. And then we can fold on both the score lines. So this piece will have a little gusset. So fold and burnish on both score lines. And for attaching the piece, it's best to have your 1/2 inch line folded. And then, like I said, we are going to work on top of piece C, so that's why I call it the C section, and I'm going to line it up on the end of the cover, so on the right side. Top to bottom, and the right edge will be lined up. So again, fold on your 1/2 inch score line on piece D, so your gusset will be visible when you place it. And I'm removing the tape backing partly, so I can place it where I want it. Have it all nicely lined up, and then I will remove the rest of the tape backing. So give it a good burnish, and then that's in place. So I had to take a little video recording break after placing this piece. It was about a day, but that's fine. We are just going to continue with the rest of our pieces now. So make sure that your gusset is standing up nicely. And here we go, the rest of our pieces. So we are going to work with piece E and F. And first I'm going to do piece E, but you can see for piece F is already prepped. So we have these pieces have two score lines on 3 sides. So it's going to be a pocket with a 1/4 inch gusset. And I'm turning it over to the bumpy side, and I'm going to show you how I've cut these pieces, because I'm not just going to simply miter it, but it's going to be a little bit different. So with the pencil I'm showing you where the score lines are and how they meet. And then with the white I will show you where I cut. So on the 1/2 inch flap I'm going to cut at an angle. And then you have that small square there, and we're going to cut straight on those lines on both sides, and then angled again on the 1/2 inch. So I'm going to cut this out on both corners where we have that score lines meet each other. So there we go. So your tape is on the dented side, and you can make these cuts on the dented side, but because I wanted to show you, I do it on the bumpy side for now. And then this is what it will look like. So I am going to make a little, how do you call that? We are going to work with the envelope punch board, and I'm going to line my piece E up with the 1 3/4 inch side. I was just going for something. You can make it a little bit wider if you want, of course. But for this piece I'm going for the 1 3/4. And I'm going to do that on both sides on the top where there's no score line. And then I'm going to cut away that piece in the middle, and I'm also going to do this on piece F. But for piece F, because it's a longer piece, I'm going to line it up with a 2 inch mark on both sides. So we're done with that. So I'm just going to use my knife and ruler to cut those pieces in the middle out. You can also do that with your paper trimmer. It's pretty easy to do as well, but I just didn't feel like taking it out. So make sure your blade is far enough out, because otherwise you will push against your ruler and your ruler will intend to shove a little bit. So I'm just prepping both of these pieces. There we go. So it's a little bit easier to reach in your pocket because we've done this, but it's optional. And also on piece E, I'm going to make a window on it. So I am going to draw the frame on the bumpy side, and I'm going 5/8 of an inch from my second score line. So the score line the furthest inwards from your piece, and from there I'm going to measure 5/8 of an inch. And on the side that has no score line, I'm going to measure that. I'm going to do another measurement, sorry. So here it's 5/8 of an inch from the second score line on the 3 sides that have those score lines, and then on the top I am going to measure, I think it was 1.5 inches down from the cut edge. So from the highest point of your piece, 1.5 inches, and then draw that line. So your frame is a little bit off-centered on the pocket. So we are going to cut out that little, well, it's almost a square. So again, I'm just doing that with my ruler and my knife. And then when we have it completely cut out, of course I've already cut it with my ruler, but I'm just cleaning it up because my blade was getting a little bit dull. I am going to measure the size of the acetate that I will need, and I'm going to cut a piece of acetate. So I think it was about 3 7/8 by 4 1/8, but I'm cut it out, and I'm going to place my tape on the acetate, and I will also place it on the cardstock around the frame. This is a 1/8 of an inch double-sided tape from scrapbook.com. It's really small, but you can also do it with a 1/4 of an inch tape and then place it on the cardstock or on your acetate. That will work perfectly as well. Doing it like this is a little bit more time consuming, placing it on 2 sides. So once we've placed all the tape, we can remove the tape backing on both pieces. And then we can stick that piece of acetate on there. So make sure you have it in the right direction and stay in between your score lines. And burnish on that tape. So I do recommend placing your acetate with double-sided tape and not with wet glue, because that can get really messy. And now we can fold on all the score lines. So we have 2 score lines on all 3 sides. And I'm just folding on the one on both longer sides and then burnish it, and then fold on the other one and burnish it. And then we will do the same thing for the bottom flap. And then we can stick those flaps on the corners. So I'm going to remove the tape backing on the bottom flap. Okay, yeah, I was quickly checking if I did it right, because I have done it before and it was wrong, so I scored my piece on the wrong direction. So now it was good. So I'm removing the tape backing on the bottom flap, and then I'm going to stick the side flaps on top of it, right there on the corner where you have your overlapping. And once we've done that, we can place it in our folio. So this pocket will go on top of your D piece that we've already placed in there, and I want to have the opening going towards the end of the folio. So I'm going to lay my piece D as flat as I can get it on my work surface, so it might be a little bit confusing. So now I am going to measure, the pocket is 4.5 inches, so I'm going to measure 4.5 inches on my piece from the bottom, because your gussets might intend to stand out a little bit, and then you can make the pocket wider than you want to have it. So those lines are going to help me to guide the pocket on the piece where I want it, and make sure that my gusset is nice and straight. So now I'm removing the tape backing on the other sides of the pocket, and I'm also placing some wet glue on it for the only purpose that it gives me a little bit of wiggle time. So it doesn't, if I'm placing it crooked, I can lift it up, because this pocket, I found it was just a little bit harder to place it. So I just put some wet glue everywhere. And now I'm going to line up the corner of the pocket with the left bottom corner of the D piece while it's laying flat on my work surface, and I'm lining it up on the bottom and on the side edge. And then I have to turn my whole folio around so I can see my pencil marks and make sure that I place that where I want it. So I have to fold it in a little bit because it's intending to stand out a little bit. So when I've got it where I want it, I'm going to burnish it on the inside with a longer bone folder. You could also use a ruler for this, or something long and thin that you can place in there. So now when we close the folio like we have it lying in front of us normally, then this is what it should look like. And then before I'm going to place my F piece, I'm going to place the closure for this one, and this piece has 2 score lines, and I still have to place the tape here, and I'm doing that on the dented side between the cut edge and our first score line, because this piece will also have a 1/4 inch gusset. And I'm going to use a corner punch on this flap, so you can leave it just like this or use another corner punch that you like, or you can use this one, of course. I'm using the scallop punch from We Are Memory Keepers. It's just a punch that I really like to use, especially with paper collections that are floral or really feminine. Then I think it really works. Also, I'm tapering the 1/2 inch of these flaps. And then we can fold and burnish on the score lines. So these pockets are having a gusset, so you can really fill them up with several photos, or you can place a really nice booklet in there or something. So what I'm doing now is I'm folding my piece D flat, so the gusset will lay flat on the folio, and I'm going to line up my flap piece, my closure piece, with that score line before the gusset. So when the gusset is standing up straight, then it will be lined up with that. So I'm placing it on there. I'm also making sure that it's lined up with the pocket, and then I can remove the tape backing. And I think it's easier to place this closure before you place your other pocket, because you have a little bit more space to place your hands. So I am going to use a magnet here for the closure, because I have that acetate window there. But of course you can also use another type of closure, a swing tab or an envelope closure. You could even do a paper clip, I think, but no, that will be a little bit difficult. But there are several options that you can choose from. But on my last few projects I haven't used any magnets, so I figured why not just go for the magnets. So this one I'm going to place on the pocket first, because I want to make sure that I have enough space from my edges for my pattern paper to hide the magnet. place the other one on top, and then I'm going to close the flap, and I have the magnet on there where I want it. So make sure your gussets are standing up nice and straight before you push down on it. And you really have to push down on it a little bit, because otherwise the magnets will stay on top of each other. So there we go, and then I'm placing some double-sided tape over the magnet to secure it a little bit more. So that's the first pocket, and now we can continue with our F piece that I showed you in the beginning. So that will also be a pocket with a 1/4 inch gusset. Okay, let's clean up a little bit. And I've already cut it, so I'm going to fold on my score lines. I'm not making an acetate window in this one. Of course you can do it if you want to, but I found that if I was going to do it in a way where I was still able to use a magnet for a closure, the frame or the window itself would be really small, and I didn't think that would visual look good. So I've decided not to do it. And then again, you don't have to put acetate in everything where you can. Just try to find the balance. So in this one, I'm just not doing it. So here we are going to do that same process, but first I'm going to see if I did it right, if I used the right measurements, and I did, luckily. So here I'm showing you that the window would be too small on this pocket for my liking. So here again I'm going to remove the tape backing from the bottom 1/2 inch flap, and then stick those 1/2 inches together on those corners. Okay, and then just like I did for the other pocket, I removed the tape backing and I placed wet glue, so I have a little bit of wiggle time, and I'm going to try to bump up the edges of the pocket. So the bottom of my F piece that I'm working with right now, I'm going to try and really bump it up against my first pocket. And of course I'm going to make sure that I'm lining it up on the edges, and I don't want to go over the score line either. So that's why I checked it before I removed all the tape backing if it was going to fit on there. And again, when I have it where I want it, I'm going to use my bone folder to really burnish it on there. So for this pocket I also made a closure flap, and I think it's piece H, again with 2 score lines, because we're going to have that gusset, and I'm going to place the tape on the dented side between the cut edge and that first score line. And again here I'm using that corner punch, the scallop corner punch, and I'm tapering the 1/2 inch flap. And then we can fold on the score lines. And then again here I'm folding on that 1/2 inch score line, and then I'm going to line it up on the top. And again I'm going to just place it as flat as I can, because it's just easier to place it. Remove the tape backing partially, and then I'm lining it up on the top. And of course, again, I'm also making sure that I'm lined up with the edges and with the score line on my left side. So I'm sticking it down. Oh, I went off, so luckily I was able to pull it up again. And then I just removed the tape backing completely and just placed it where I want it. And burnish that. And then I've found that my flap was too long for this pocket. I used the same measurement as we did on the first pocket, and it was just covering the pocket too much. So I've decided that I'm going to cut it down, and I'm cutting it down by 1 inch. So here I'm just deciding, am I going to do this, yes or no? But I've decided, yes, I am going to do this because I think it's going to be visual better. So I'm making a little pencil mark. I've decided to make it 1 inch shorter and make a little pencil mark there, and then I'm going to line it up in my paper trimmer. And because I've already used a corner punch, I'm not able to line it up nicely, but also because it's the whole piece. So I have to line it up with one of my lines somewhere in the middle of my paper trimmer, and that's where the pencil mark is going to help me to get it straight. And then I'm just cutting that away. And yeah, that's much better. So use the corner punch again. And that's how it goes when you're designing. You think this is going to work, and then when it's on there, you don't like it, so you have to change it. But then I was going to place my magnets, and that was a really close call because I was not thinking about the little slit that we made earlier with our envelope punch board. So you will see that it's pretty close on the edges, closer than I would like. So what I did in the cutting guide, I gave you the measurement for the closure 1/4 of an inch bigger than I have it right here. I think it will still look good visual, but you have a little bit more space for your magnet. So for me, I was just going to roll with it right now because it worked. And I didn't feel like removing the whole thing, so but I think it's better to make it 1/4 of an inch bigger. So that's what I did in the cutting guide. So again, I'm just placing it and then stick it on there, and then you will see that it's pretty close to the edge, a little closer than I would have liked on both the closure and on the pocket. Okay, so again, you could also place your magnet on the inside of the pocket if you want. That's what I'm trying to show you here. Yeah, let's cover that with some double-sided tape. There we go. So I'm just making a little note for myself to change that in the cutting guide, and then we can move on. So now when we are opening up this flap, I'm going to work on the C part itself, and I'm going to make a waterfall, and I've prepared 6 pieces, and I have 2 extra pieces for if I want to make it 8. So these are your pieces I, and yeah, like I said, I've prepared 6, but I've decided to use 8 in the end, as you will see. So all these pieces have tape on the dented side, and I'm going to fold and burnish all these pieces. Okay, so our C piece is I think 6 3/8 of an inch, and our waterfall pieces are 6 1/4. So you will have just a little bit of space on both sides between your score lines. So we are going to try and place it as centered as we can get it. And I'm removing the tape backing partially, and the first piece I'm going to line up with the top edge of the folio, and I'm placing my bone folder on there to keep it flat. Use the weight of it. So carefully line that up. And this is something that I've been doing a lot lately. I just forget that I didn't remove the tape backing completely. Let's call it pregnancy brain, because I'm doing a lot of stupid things lately, but we'll manage. So now it's removed, we're burnishing it down, and we are going to place all our pieces. So I'm going to show you one more on how I do it to make sure that I'm not too crooked, because waterfalls can become pretty crooked. And here I was thinking about, okay, how am I going to place this on my work surface? But I'm taking a second piece, remove the tape backing partially again, try not to push on the part where the tape backing is removed. And I'm placing it up against that 1/2 inch of my first piece. But I'm also really looking at my score lines on the middle. Am I still centered in between there? And then I'm going to close my first flap while holding this piece in place and see if the edges line up. And if they do, again, I'm holding it in place as good as I can, then I'm going to stick it down. So sometimes that means that you don't completely rely on the 1/2 inch of your previous flap. So this was where I've placed 6 flaps, and yeah, I think 6 was a nice number, but then I had quite a lot of space on the bottom. So I had that 2 pieces lying there that I could also make into these waterfall pieces. So I've decided to do it and make 8 because I think it will look better. So here I've placed all 8. Give it all a good burnish. And now you can see that it ends about, well, maybe an inch, somewhere around an inch from the bottom. So I was really thinking about what am I going to do for closure, but I'm just going to place a normal closure, as you will see. But I'm also going to place a magnet right on the top flap that I'm going to use for the closure, but also going to use that to keep the D flap closed. So this is going to be our closure. It's piece J, I think. And again, I've used that corner punch, the scallop corner punch, yeah, piece J. And I made a score line on the bottom. This is an inch. I gave myself a little bit more, so I'm placing 2 strips of double-sided tape here on the dented side. And then we can fold and burnish on that score line. And then I'm going to place that on the bottom of piece C, the cover. So I'm determining the center here. Again, I'm using my bone folder to keep it flat. So I'm placing the 0 on my ruler on the center, and my J piece is 2 inches. So I'm making a little pencil mark 1 inch from that from the center. And then that are my guidelines to place this closure on there. So I'm placing it, lining it up with the bottom and lining it up with those pencil marks. So there we go. And here you can see that I've already placed a magnet on the D flap. That's going to keep that in place. So here I'm placing an extra magnet for that flap. So I'm using 3 magnets here, and normally I really don't like to use a lot of magnets, but I felt like this was going to need it to keep it all in place nicely. So now when we close that, it will keep in place. And then I still figured that the bottom of my D flap was hanging loose a little bit. So in the end, I've also placed a magnet a little bit lower on the page and a little bit lower on the closure of the waterfall to keep that closed as well. But yeah, there were quite a lot of magnets. So finally, for here, this section, we also have a pocket, piece K. So tape is on the dented side on 3 sides with a score line, and we are going to miter that pocket, the corners, and fold and burnish on that score lines. Make sure there's no overlapping. And this pocket will go underneath the waterfall on the bottom. So when you place it, make sure you stay above the score line of your closure and in between the score lines on your side. And it should fit with the measurement that I gave you. So I'm just removing all the tape backing and sticking it on there. And that's it. So nice pocket there. You can keep that closed. And we can keep that closed. And this flap is opening because my cutting surface is also magnetic. So the magnet keeps on sticking to my work surface. So here you see I've also placed that magnet to keep it closed a little bit better. Because when you close it, it intends to open up. And then I'm checking if I didn't use too much space because we had about ½ inch there, but I think it will work. It will open up now because the bottom part of the folio is empty. But once we fill that up, it's going to be better. So I think we did a pretty good job on this part. So on the next part, we are going to work on the B section. It's the middle part. And for now, thank you for watching and enjoy the rest of your day.